Hello everyone, it's me, Greg Miller from Kinda Funny Games, and if you didn't know, Insomniac was held ransom by some cyber hackers, the types, you know what I mean, saying that they wanted $2 million or they'd release a whole bunch of Insomniac files.
They contain proprietary information about Microsoft's plans for a refreshed Xbox console, upcoming announced video games, and older discussions around purchasing Nintendo.
And they did that. Insomniac did not give them the money. The hackers released the files, and now the internet is in flames as all sorts of information about Wolverine, Insomniac, personal data of the developers, and so much more is floating around.
A person familiar with the matter, who asked not to be identified, discussing the confidential information, said Microsoft was responsible for the uploaded documents. Now, this is where we start, because this is the tone setter for the episode. What the fuck happened here?
This has led to a giant conversation about how this should be handled in reporting video game news. I wanted to come to you and talk to you about how we'll approach it on Kinda Funny Games Daily today. Today, we will not go into the details of this leak. We will instead talk about the human component.
Right, people have been talking about it all morning. It started off last night. It's funny because I've been talking on the shows that I've been going to bed earlier nowadays.
All the developers at Insomniac, who just had years and years of work published when it was not ready to be seen, information published when it was not ready to be seen, contracts published when they were not ready to be talked about, and of course their own personal information shared against their will. This is an invasion of their privacy, done in one of the most malicious ways possible.
I think one of the issues that I see with games journalism, and yesterday's leaks highlight this, is that games journalists have forgotten who they work for. They should, or used to, work for us, the gamers. However, that has since shifted into handholding and defense of these major corporations. And ultimately, it highlights one of the core problems that this industry has had since the beginning, and it's this natural, innate bias, this tribalism that we continue to see play out. And we've seen the latest rounds of these play out in a concept called the tax. The Xbox tax, the PlayStation tax, the Nintendo tax. All of these systems all have their ingrained biases built in. And not to mention the giant tax of anybody who is trying to step in to the industry. The costs are absurd, so absurd that Google understandably quit right out the gate. There's problems there. Amazon has been paying that tax, but they continue to deliver. So it's interesting to see, and the future of gaming, honestly, it's going to be one wild ride. That's probably the most positive way that I could speak about it. But let's condemn, first and foremost, the hacks. Let's condemn the sharing of their personal information. Insomniac was attacked and held for ransom, and then we got the leaks. So for me, my general personal view is not showing off the gameplay, but the industry information in and of itself should be talked about, should be reported on. It's good information, I think, for each and every one of us to have. But it's been interesting to see the industry all of a sudden grow a backbone. It feels that it doesn't mean that it is malicious, but it continues to highlight that aspect, that hypocrisy. And for that, I have to say, we're not going to all agree. We're not going to get every content creator, every news site to sit here and all of a sudden follow some kind of code of ethics. That would be great when it comes down to leaks, but that's unrealistic. I've seen people calling for that. Oh, you shouldn't talk about this, or you shouldn't talk about that, or what about this? It's all so pedantic. And at the end of the day, you got to do, everybody's talking about it. We're going to talk about it here, and we're going to try to cover it with a sense of compassion and excitement, especially as it relates to industry analysis, because this in and of itself highlights major issues in the coming of game development. Namely, a lot of people are predicting an upcoming crash, and I don't necessarily think that might be how it plays out, but it's going to be interesting one way or the other. Now, this isn't just me saying this. I wanted to highlight a couple of things for you guys today, so let's jump into it. First and foremost, if we look, I'm going to highlight David Jaffe here. This is something I think is absolutely interesting. We'll go ahead and make it a little bit bigger on the screen here for you guys today. So he says, as a human and former game dev who lied and busted our asses to keep stuff secret, I feel for the devs 100%. Yes. Leaks take away the gift that we give the developers. It's our excitement and our surprise. And I think that is a very important factor in this. They're putting in lots of work. They're making less money doing so than they would in another industry. And they're doing it because they're passionate, and that passion can be taken advantage of by these corporations. So the gift that we give them, not in just purchasing the games, but it's the shock and surprise and excitement. Like, look at our no light, no fire coverage. This is exciting. This is, it's fun. Now you start speculating. It's a whole thing, and it's beautiful. Anyway, he says, but game sites, and I know many gamers will be surprised to read this, given how so many of the sites act like game biz PR. Exactly. Answers to the gamers, aka their customers, and their customers click on this stuff and are happy to hear about it. Even when I was a dev, I was always surprised at how much game fans and game journalists seem to bend over backwards and treat the game makers with kid gloves. Hard to think of many other industries that do this. I mean, do you think that if plans for the next 5 years of Tesla leak, that they're out in the world, no one should report on that? Do you think that if there's a trade on baseball teams that hasn't been announced, but the press learns about that and the sports press should not report on it? This isn't Watergate or WikiLeaks. The public doesn't need to know this information for the public good, but if it's out there and it's not illegal to report on it, it's foolish to blame the press for running with this story. And on top of all that, it's not like the game itself is going to get harmed. GTA 6 leaked, and then Rockstar dropped off the official trailer 6 to 12 months later, and then it still got the world talking. Same thing will happen with Wolverine. And yes, the same thing will happen with Wolverine. However, the pure excitement of that, I like it when it's controlled. Teams are working on these things. Now, again, if the information, comes my way, I feel there's a level of responsibility as long as it's not doxing anybody. That's just that's my personal take on it, but we can go from there. Last of Us 2 is different. I love that game, but people cite the leaks as why it may have not done as well as the previous game. It wasn't that stuff leaked. I think that it was what leaked turned off a number of players who didn't like what they were seeing and narrative-wise. Anyway, my 2 cents, but I 100% feel for the devs and the game makers. It sucks to have these surprises ruined. And on a good note, on one of the vertical slice selections of the Wolverine looks freaking fantastic and brutal. No clue why Sony isn't demanding this stuff doesn't get taken down, or if they are, it's very odd. I got my video copyright struck by a company called Muso.com, who I assume is contracted by Sony, but that's fine. I didn't show any footage or plans. I simply showed the slides that showed the budget of Insomniac Games and the financial commitment aside regarding the Sony-Marvel relationship. And if they struck it because of those sides are Sony property, that's fine. I get it. But I don't get why Sony, unlike Rockstar with GTA 6 leaks, is allowing hundreds of YouTube videos with the stuff, and I posted and all of that footage to stay up. Not sure what the deal of that aspect of it is. Now, a thread here from Stephen Totillo I think is interesting to provide some insight in terms of what is it that needs to be required, and for some reason my voice is deciding to fail. He writes, absolutes are usually impossible to maintain, but are worthy goals. For journalists, my sense has always been that the goal should be to report as much of what they know as possible and reduce from there, to protect sources, minimize harm, even not to waste the reader's time. In the case of recent Insomniac's hack, the judgment calls are tricky. To some, reporting anything from the hack is, if not aiding in the crime, encouraging a future one. They are already incentive to do future attacks. The monetization behind that is literally there. That has nothing to do with that, because they're not making money off of people reporting on it. It only adds to the pressure that they can leverage against somebody else next time, and you can't stop that. That's an impossibility. It's not to suggest that everybody just stops talking about it. I don't know. Find a genie, make a wish. That's the best play you have there. Anyhow, and he goes on to say, covering with school shooters, etc. But it's also against the grain of journalists to know a thing that might serve their readers' interest and not report on it. At extremes, not saying this is the case, it's elitist and it fails the public. Hoarding information, not the reporter's main goal, communicating it is. With the Insomniac hack, reporting personal details from the leak are uncontroversially crossing the line. Absolutely agree. Probably only fair game if they somehow revealed abuse. The visuals about upcoming games, the details, release schedules, etc., to me, low priority to report, but also we were widespread to the public before any reporter touched them. This is empirical to expect media to just pretend that they're not out there. Then there's the business details, budgets and sales, deals with companies, stark numbers, glimpses to the reality of how games are made and how they fare. Uncomfortably, that it has the potential to educate reporters, perhaps the public, about how the industry works. As a reporter, do you look away from that? Do you not gather that knowledge so that you, at the very least, can better understand the way the business of games work? You may never even report it, may never even ask about it, but perhaps it helps to know it. But then, are you just hoarding? Amid all of this, there's hurt, much of it expressed by game developers who are regularly harassed and hounded, and there's an innate wish that this didn't happen and that no one had to deal with it. To those in the industry, trust me, the media is probably with you on that. Someone mentioned to me recently that they were competing valid views here, and at least it's an absolute truth that I emphasize with everyone who is wrestling with the situation, no matter what field they're in. And then that's just, I think, a beautifully well written statement. However, you can also go find that they also report, like, this in and of itself is an interesting challenge to how people decide to report on it. And I have no issue. Let me just drop actually back here. Camera. And I have no issue if, as a standard, we want to say, you know what, we're, like, if gaming kind of funny games or any of these areas want to say, hey, you know what, we made a policy and we're going to go ahead and follow that policy. That policy is communicated beforehand, and then essentially that gives us the ability to then say, okay, great. For example, if they had a policy they weren't going to report on leaks, and then they didn't report on the Xbox leak and the Capcom leak, even though those were also, some of those are hacks. The Xbox was a complete user error, but to say, like, okay, we're not going to do that because this violates the policy that we want to put in place, to do that in real time, to do that as this happens, it just then continues to highlight that you're actually here acting more as Sony PR than you are as anything else. And that in and of itself, I think, needs to change. And then finally, the last thing I was enjoying in and of itself is this great meme. Obviously, we see this all the time. You can see Insomniac gaming media jumping in front of the bullet and taking it for the team. Anyway, guys, as always, your thoughts are appreciated and welcome. If you feel like these videos earn it, like and subscribe for more of these conversations. And yeah, I appreciate you guys so much for being here. Hopefully you all enjoyed. Hopefully I will see you next time. But until then, take care.